We remember the names of killers. We can replay their interviews in our heads. We even turn their stories into memes. But the victims? Do you remember their names? Or even their faces? Probably not, and that's not entirely your fault. Somewhere along the line, Netflix made murder feel normal. They figured out something truly terrifying. Humans don't just watch tragedy. We crave it. Take a look at these two headlines, and tell me which one you would rather click on. If you're like me, you're probably going to click the one on the right. People are just naturally drawn to gloom and doom. And if you don't believe me, just take a look at the video you clicked on. True crime documentaries weren't always a staple of American media. Before the 80s, if you wanted to learn about a crime, you turned on the news or picked up a newspaper. While documentaries were growing, true crime wasn't yet a mainstream obsession. However, that all changed with a film called The Thin Blue Line in 1988. Directed by Errol Morris, it pioneered the genre and divided audiences. The film told the story of Randall Dale Adams, wrongly convicted of killing a Dallas police officer. Throughout the film, Morris used graphic cinematic reenactments, unheard of at the time, and critics hated it. They said it made tragedy look too much like entertainment, but that controversy, it worked. The public couldn't look away, and the film didn't just change documentaries, it changed what we expect from the truth. This taught future filmmakers something Netflix would later perfect. Truth doesn't need to be told, it needs to be watched. By the mid-2000s, streaming was replacing physical media. Blockbuster fell, Redbox faded, but Netflix adapted. Most people forget, including myself, that Netflix started as a DVD by mail service. Users would pay a monthly subscription fee, and online they would create a queue of movies they want to watch. Netflix would then send them these DVDs in these little red envelopes, and once you had finished watching the movie, you would just simply mail it back. And then Netflix would send you the next DVD that was in your queue. But Netflix knew the system was becoming outdated fast, and they launched their own streaming platform, which we all know and love. By 2011, they were creating original shows and movies like House of Cards and Beast of No Nation, which both went on to be major hits for Netflix. Netflix tripled the amount of subscriptions they had. The initial release of House of Cards alone increased subscriptions by 3 million. And these early wins showed Netflix one thing: control the content, control the culture. So they started experimenting. One show and movie after another, and eventually one genre absolutely exploded: true crime documentaries. Making a Murderer and Tiger King were some of these first few true crime documentary successes for Netflix, and we all remember when they exploded. I mean, you go on TikTok or Instagram back in 2020 or whatever it was, and you couldn't go anywhere without seeing them. Tiger King in particular was destined to be an instant hit. This Netflix documentary had everything you would see in a sitcom, but it was an actual documentary. From exotic animals to bitter rivalries to characters who you'd swear were made up. It had everything. And at the center of this chaos was Joe Exotic, a zookeeper who ran a private tiger park in Oklahoma. This documentary highlights the neglect these tigers faced under Joe Exotic, and an insane rivalry he had with animal rights activist Carol Baskin. In attempts to try and shut down Joe Exotic's tiger park, Carol Baskin winds up dead, with Joe Exotic in the middle of it. The success Netflix experienced from this documentary made Netflix realize that fear, tragedy, and moral confusion kept people watching longer than anything else. They had cracked the emotional code of addiction, not through joy, but through horror. But how far was Netflix willing to push these boundaries? September 21st, 2022, Netflix premiered Dahmer, an entire series dedicated to reenacting the life of Jeffrey Dahmer and the horrible atrocities he committed. And I'm gonna be real with you. The show was good, but at what cost? The most controversial scene in this series wasn't even about Jeffrey Dahmer. The opening shot in the last episode, episode 10, starts off with a contractor van pulling up to a nice suburban house. Out steps a young man and an older guy with a beer belly, talking about giving the young man a job after he gets through a quick interview. As they walk into the house, the young man notices a horrible smell that the older guy just plays off as being probably a dead raccoon or something. But during this interaction, in the background, there's a portrait of a clown, hinting at the fact that this older guy is in fact John Gacy, one of the most infamous serial killers in all of history. The next shot shows Gacy pouring this boy a glass of soda, which we as the audience can only assume is spiked. This assumption is confirmed moments later as the vision of the boy starts to go fuzzy as John Gacy binds his hands. I can't show all of what happens next, but Gacy proceeds to attack and strangle the boy, and this is arguably one of the most violent scenes in the entire series. But what is shown next is even worse. Gacy is shown drowning him in his bathtub in his infamous clown attire, while the young man is tied up and completely naked. And I'm sure you can assume what Gacy did to him that this show does not display prior to that. I'm 100% certain that anyone watching this video can understand why this scene got so much backlash. Yes, the audience did click on a series about a serial killer, but where do we draw the line? This series was supposed to be dedicated to the life of Jeffrey Dahmer, and it was up until this point, but showing this graphic of a scene just because Dahmer believed him and John Gacy were different doesn't justify you putting this scene into it. Netflix simply did this to get a true fear and disgust out of the audience to keep them watching. And I know for a fact that this was their true intentions, because in the bathroom scene, Gacy is seen, as I said, in his clown attire, killing his victim. But just with a few seconds of due diligence, you will find that there has never been any evidence that suggests that the real John Gacy killed people dressed up as a clown. Not only did this show desensitize the millions of people who watched it to the true horrors of his crimes, but they never asked the victims' families for permission to make it in the first place. Netflix successfully turned someone's last moments into mere background noise from when you're cooking dinner. The scariest part is, Netflix knew we'd watch. They knew the next tragedy was their next payday. They knew we need our next case, our next killer. The algorithm doesn't care about morality, it only counts the minutes you watched. But this isn't going unnoticed. Netflix is facing growing criticism, with critics calling out this exploitation. But can we really put all this blame on Netflix? After all, we are the ones that are clicking. The ones asking for more, the ones that watch to the very end. Netflix is simply supplying that demand. Netflix has all the data necessary to understand that true crime documentaries are a guaranteed hit. They see all the TikToks talking about how crazy that one scene was. They see the podcast discussing every minor detail of each episode. And most importantly, they see the spike in subscriptions each time a new true crime documentary gets released. Netflix knows the negative effects, but they also know people will continue to keep asking for more. Anyways, that's all I have for you guys today. Click my face right now if you guys want to watch. I don't know what's on my face, but if you want to watch it, I'm sure it's a good video. Please click it. I'm pointing at myself.